Hello, everyone, and welcome to Octane's partner webcast with Crowdstrike. I'm here to talk to you about Zero Trust delivered by the cloud. A moment of housekeeping. If you have questions as I go along, please feel free to enter them into the chat box there on your left. I have colleagues standing by to respond as quickly as possible. We'll also have some time at the end to look at questions as well. My agenda today is to talk about frictionless Zero Trust from the cloud and one way to construct it. We'll break down elements of how we look at Zero Trust from the Crowdstrike perspective. Then we'll add business value insights from customer use cases. You'll also hear from Grant Sewell, Chief of Security and Privacy at Safelite Autoglass, about their journey and Crowdstrike experience. So a little about me. I've been in security since 2001, when I was hired out of a NOC to join the team building IBM's new Security Operations Center and MSS practice. Over the next 9 years, we built a security business that grew consistently 300% year over year. I've managed other SOCs since then and worked in product management and marketing for a number of security tools and disciplines. I was part of the Preempt security team that was acquired by Crowdstrike last fall. Security really excites me, and I will try to keep my enthusiasm within manageable levels. So I'm going to start by saying something a little controversial here. None of us are technically Zero Trust vendors. We are security companies, and what we offer is Zero Trust capability. I hope with this talk to encourage you and your teams and leadership to discuss and discover how to build a Zero Trust framework and architecture, especially in and from the crowd. And maybe you'll find Crowdstrike has what will work for your organization. There are 6 pillars of Zero Trust, so I'll take a moment to define our terms. I think all users and devices, the first 2 pillars, count as entities. Compromise of any kind of entity can represent a danger to the other pillars because they're an ingress point. All data sources and computing services are resources. This includes endpoints like laptops, desktops, physical servers, virtual machines. Tying them all together, all resources are associated with users, which is human or service programmatic accounts, and they access other enterprise applications or resources on premises or in the cloud. In conclusion, I really think you'll find that all networks are hybrid, if we admit it. Hardly anyone works with dumb terminals anymore. I don't think there's more than a handful of organizations that don't use some kind of software as a service in the cloud, let alone infrastructure as a service or take advantage of cloud hosting. Because the data on my laptop here is still my company's data, it's an entity that contains resources and that I'm sending out or sharing from different locations. Which brings me to the final part of Zero Trust architecture, the automation, the analysis. All communication between all of these pillars has to be secured regardless of network location. I'm going to say that again. All communication needs to be secured regardless of network location, irrespective of whether the endpoint device which is used to access other resources is managed by the enterprise or not managed by the enterprise. Bring your own device, used on the network or from my home comfy chair and office. All access requests have the same security requirements. And to do effective access means you need analytics in order to do smart automation. Crowdstrike plays strongly to all of these pillars: users, applications, networks, devices, automation, and analysis. And we have key controls for all the devices, like checking vulnerable operating systems. So if everybody wants Zero Trust and everybody needs Zero Trust, why isn't it standard? Honestly, a lot of people are talking about it, but few are doing it. This Forrester survey was from last October, 2020. Especially with a lot of the budget hits from COVID, lots of companies seem to be at the pilot stage of commitment, but not really in execution. I've done ride-alongs with companies who are starting to make inquiries, and there's a lot of realistic expectations. Questions are going around from boards to architecture saying, okay, let's start it. We'll start where? 2 things we hear over and over are, 1, we don't know where all of our service accounts are or who owns them, and 2, we're focusing on just our privileged users due to money issues. Crowdstrike's Zero Trust native approach lets security teams take many steps at once towards Zero Trust protection and architecture without the overhead of managing terabytes of data, threat feeds, hardware, software, not to mention the ongoing personnel costs. Hiring security specialists, in particular with high-level SIM or architectural experience, is hard. I know, I've tried on 2 continents. Zero Trust from the cloud, the Crowdstrike capabilities, offers the continuous multi-directory visibility, deep visibility into the scope and impact of identities across hybrid directories. So the set that you set up for your cloud, your sales, your marketing, all of these endpoints, every workstation, every server, every service can be known. There's no logs. It's real-time threat detection, uncovering real-time reconnaissance, lateral movements, and persistence without that pile of logs. And then improving your security posture with extended MFA. We would like to say that you can extend your Okta MFA to any resource or application, including legacy, proprietary systems and tools, authentication patterns, find your behavior baselines, and get a risk score for every entity everywhere. I'm going to show you how Crowdstrike cloud-based solutions can reduce the total expertise and personnel required to manage your zero trust engagement with minimal security load on your end users and security teams alike. Another data point. Let's talk about time to detection and response. This is a standard SOC scenario and near and dear to my heart. As an anomaly happens, an alert is raised on a security tool and sent to another tool, maybe as a log, maybe every few minutes. That alert is validated. Maybe it's responded to, maybe it's escalated to a more senior analyst if it's a generic signature. The reputation and behavior of the file can be analyzed, maybe using tools. Maybe you actually have somebody that can do malware sandboxing and knows what they're looking at. Through all of this process, the analysts are trying to determine what, when, how, where did it go? What did the bad guy touch behind the attack? I used to say all the time that the why is missing. And this is kind of why I think identity protection is cool for all of those years we wished we had it. In summary, there's a lot of manual effort, phone calls, explanations and instructions played out in an elaborate game of telephone. At best, you get a new rule made for it. Sometimes you get a block. Sometimes you get a new signature or policy rule. Meanwhile, if an employee needed to be doing their job and the security stack is made hard or annoying, they've probably found another way to do it, or another tool, or you simply lost their productivity through blocking everything unknown. So what does the zero trust solution look like? We'll give it a Microsoft example. Some of it is free and bundled, some of it is not. All of it is going to require a fair bit of time and specialized knowledge or consulting fees to help it all. It doesn't all talk to each other natively. And recently, they've even said some AD protocols, the legacy ones, can't really be secured. So you should just migrate everything to Azure. And then there are also Azure outages this spring. So without being mean to anybody, let's just summarize. As security deployment gets more and more complicated, especially with complicated networks that grew organically rather than planned and springing independently from the mind of Zeus, it increases cost, offers more potential for breaches, and creates more avenues where things can go wrong. Finally, making ways to make your budget go further with massive log repositories, external threat feeds, ticketing or alert systems, and hardware add-on software components is hard. You know the saying, there's no such thing as a free kitten? It also applies to getting Microsoft products to play well together and with non-Microsoft tools. Time and consultation fees are money. And there's no mention of automation and adapting to changing risk. When we sum up the zero trust of it, here's the picture of what it looks like, all the different pieces and the pillars all together. And some of them, as you see, they don't really talk to each other at all up front. There's too much friction in the zero trust. So Crowdstrike's zero trust approach from the cloud is better. It's the only cloud-native solution to stop breaches in real time from any endpoint, workload, or identity. And cloud means fast. You can set up identity protection and endpoint at nearly any scale in a couple of hours. We provide protection against threats like compromise of legitimate credentials and attacks on the identity store. Shutting down these incidents creates an automated defense against software supply chain attacks and many stages of ransomware attack techniques. We offer visibility and correlation for all threats directly and via pre-integrated partners like Okta everywhere for the deployment model. This means that no matter how Frankensteinian your network is, or hybrid, or even if you have a pure cloud or Azure solution, you can have identity and endpoints both covered. And the more difficult to secure entities like remote users or legacy systems or unmanaged devices can now be covered. We asked Grant Sewell from Safelite Autoglass why he likes the Crowdstrike endpoint and identity combination for zero trust. Over to you, Grant.
Hi, my name is Grant Sewell. I'm head of cybersecurity and privacy for Safelite Autoglass. We're the largest vehicle glass repair, replacement, and recalibration service under one brand in the world. Especially in the current environment, some of our key initiatives are really focused around our associates. We have a large swath of employees that are working from home. They're in a new environment, in a troubled situation. And the best thing that we can do from a security perspective is ensure their experiences are frictionless and seamless, so they have the best possible remote working environment. On top of that, I'd say some of the other experiences that the priorities that we have right now are truly looking at all of our applications and taking a risk-based approach for both access and data security. The reality is that all of the experiences that we tend to implement in security are black and white. And the concept of saying that if you're remote, that you have to use multi-factor authentication, and that's just a black and white approach, is antiquated. By taking a risk-based approach for all of our associates, which are suddenly remote, but being able to add a risk-based context of knowing that I normally log in from this location or this type of a device or from this operating system, allows us to create more frictionless security experiences. For all of a sudden, security is no longer creating an experience that slows me down in my workday. They're truly enabling a better experience. And yes, we do stop behavior when there is bad things going on, but we do it at a high confidence level by using risk-based approaches. With both of the products, which we've leveraged pretty heavily, CrowdStrike Falcon was already a really solid endpoint protection platform, which was showing its value. Separately, we were leveraging Preempt, now Falcon Zero Trust, in an aspect that allowed us to do risk-based behavior associations with all of our users. And truthfully, as we're creating risk scores for all of our users, that's one of the most interesting things that happens in our environment. Everybody always wants to know, well, what's my risk score and how do I drive those scores down? Now, instead of our associates having to log into multiple consoles, I'm excited about the partnership with CrowdStrike because that will allow us to see risk scores from our user behavior to match up to the behaviors that we're already seeing on the endpoints and match it up with cloud services, directories, legacy applications, everywhere we already have directory integration. So it's just a natural blend of both tools. And now if I can get it in one console, it really streamlines my overall investigation process. I think zero trust is a whole, and it's a great buzzword. In the end of the day, that's identity security. And it comes down to what do we know our users are doing? What do we know where they're going? And what are they accessing? And so when I look at what my security team does on a day-to-day basis, we have two tenets. It's called get visibility and keep score. We want to see everything going on in the environment. And that's one of the things that Preempt and CrowdStrike allow us to do. But the other piece is we want to measure our success and performance of our tools and our people and our process by keeping score and running good metrics, by knowing the behaviors of all of our users and our devices and the things connecting to our network. It creates a more secure environment and allows us to make better decisions from a security perspective. From a business perspective, the risk scoring, it actually prevents those conversations that I have with the executive team. When you don't make a mistake because you're making high confidence decisions about whether or not to turn off somebody's account or prompt them for another form of authentication or lock their access, those types of questions don't happen anymore because we're making more confident decisions. It's actually increasing the accuracy of our security team. And then with the API integrations, it'll allow us to actually automate a lot of these tasks, ensure that we're making data-driven decisions, which certainly resonates with our board of directors and our leadership team. By showing that I'm making decisions based off of actual data and reasonable and making decisions off of known behavior and activity, it increases their confidence in me and my team that we're doing the right things and securing the environment. I think one of the things we're most excited about is the value that CrowdStrike and Preempt can bring together with a singular cloud-based console. One of the biggest value adds of Falcon Endpoint today is that it allows me to quickly deploy an agent in a completely remote location, such as a merger or acquisition, and instantly have that protection and visibility. Now, pairing that with Falcon Zero Trust, I can do the exact same thing and suddenly have behavioral analysis. And for networks that are new to us that maybe we weren't managing in the past, that now I can suddenly have visibility end to end from both user behavior and endpoint security in one console, it really speeds up that ability for us to protect an environment and know what's going on, no matter where an endpoint is. And I think in today's environment, with folks working from home, working remote, not in the office anymore, This becomes more and more important about us understanding that user behavior where we don't control the networks necessarily, but now we can suddenly get that visibility without needing to deploy additional servers or racks of equipment. We can get that done with an agent, and we can get it done at work at the speed of really our business. Embracing these cloud-based security technologies has been a real boom for our business. It's enabled us to move faster. It's enabled us to enable our business partners. And truthfully, bringing together CrowdStrike and Falcon Zero Trust into one platform, it really was two different solutions that now are just making each other that much stronger. So seeing again from that user behavior side, ensuring that my endpoints are protected, and now being able to make even better decisions based on the machine learning that Falcon is already doing, and now adding in the user information so that it's even more accurate about what's typical for that user or that role or that location, really just makes it that much stronger. And I think it really comes back to having confidence in it really comes back to having confidence in our security operations and making better decisions. This is really letting security lead in an innovation area and create a better experience for your associates, which is the number one thing that people want right now. We want better experience, more comfortable working conditions, better devices at home. This enables you to do basically whatever you need to do from a business perspective and still get a good security experience. Before we implemented Falcon Zero Trust, we were prompting people multiple times a day for multi-factor authentication to log into mail on their mobile devices. And there was no benefit in that. We already knew it was their device. We knew it was their email. We knew it was them. There was no suspicious behavior. But by looking at it from a risk-based perspective, that was a win. People were very excited to no longer have to do that. To be able to take on new challenges like extending your password length because you have compensating controls in risk analysis, and now actually only requiring password changes when it's needed or when a password's breached. Those types of experiences for our end users are, one, creating better passwords because they're using stronger passwords that don't have to be changed as often, but also they're excited that they're only doing that in a less frequent time versus, say, 45 days. That isn't a solution, that's a punishment. So by enabling these things, it truly is a business value. It's a productivity add for our associates, and it reduces things like help desk calls, service desk time, security investigation time. All of this really drives a better experience. And that's what we're expected to do now as a CIO, as a CISO. It's not about just stopping things, it's about enabling people and keeping it secure.
So let's look at the zero trust process, securing access by adding risk scores with confidence to security automation. We'll start with the requester. And I say requester rather than user because it could be a human or a machine. Maybe it's somebody's credentials are going to do the walking. Maybe it's IT doing a remote takeover of my laptop because I have mucked up my password change again. Maybe it's a web server querying or writing to a database. The requester can be a user account or it can be a service or programmatic account. Either way, again, this is an emphasis about how it's all about identity and endpoints. So a decision has to be made to grant IT or the web server access. Old school says make rules. Rules are boring and they can be worked around. CrowdStrike continuously collects data on about every endpoint, every access, authentication, and authorization request. It collects information about my credentials and which system and IT admin or I are the administrators for. It looks at our access patterns. For instance, what are the customary resources accessed? What are the normal services I use on my everyday job? This is context, and it's an important part of every authentication request. This is where we start talking about technology and controls. You've heard about least privilege and segmentation. This is where you start to think about what is important to assess before granting access. Here's where you have your role-based access criteria and separate your responsibilities and segment by your user groups or regions. This is super useful if you want to separate sales and marketing from accessing your GitHub and your dev environment, for instance. This is also where you should stop and consider if all of your identity solutions are playing nicely with every other security access granting tools you may already have in your environment, or somebody may demand that you have, like a WAF or a SWIG or a proxy. Does all of your information feed into the SIM if you have a SIM? If it's required, can you supply action items to your SOAR system? Cooperative interaction is key to building zero trust. If you've grown by acquisition, you might be using different companies for SSO or MFA. Maybe this is an opportunity to consolidate. This is also a friendly reminder that Okta can do both. Every technology here has to have an easy API connector and out-of-the-box rules that are easy to set up. It's that fast policy button again, and I'm going to keep harping on it. At Crowdstrike, we have something called a Spectra Alliance, of which Okta is a prized part for providing plug-and-play capability for a zero-trust architecture. Others you see are there below. So that's the potential stack. But what do we do about rogue users? It's the biggest challenge for any network, really. That's a valid credential doing bad things. This is why you're constantly warning your people not to use their work address as a login for a pizza delivery service. Sure, we trust your security, but do you trust the security of that food delivery service? You're welcome to visit one of our Demo Tuesday crowdcasts to hear how much damage an outsider can do with just a copy of your password hash from that pizza delivery service and maybe your name from LinkedIn that connects to your work identity. Let's talk about that kind of scenario, even if you only have the basics of endpoint identity in Okta. Okta integrates with Crowdstrike's endpoint security and detection, ensuring users can only access corporate resources via secure and compliant devices. Okta's Identity Cloud takes the Falcon device risk signals to create a risk profile for every login attempt. Okta uses these signals to make the appropriate response to an access request, such as denying access or prompting for an additional factor. If I'm on my personal phone instead of my work phone, I get challenged. If someone is trying to be me from a device elsewhere, they'll fail the challenge or maybe simply be blocked by policy. That's one method. Okta also integrates with CrowdStrike's identity protection. This is a deeper integration. We can use and push user identity behavioral data, historic risk scores, and offer additional policy options. CrowdStrike Identity Threat Protection creates a census of human and service accounts, along with hundreds of behavioral patterns, including attributes associated with the account, the endpoint used to authenticate to a resource, the account baseline, access locations, access deviations. This is a continuous assessment of changing risk, determines how CrowdStrike and Okta permit access to a resource. CrowdStrike Identity Protection comes with out-of-the-box dynamic policy templates built around behavior, user attributes, and so on, that can be defined to make resource accesses deterministic. For example, as we've all learned in a very public incident over the winter, it is wise never to let a service account RDP directly into the domain controller. Make a rule for it. Access to individual enterprise resources can be granted on a per-session basis. With artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities, user trust is evaluated before the access is granted to a specific resource. We can detect collateral movement this way in real time without looking at logs, without looking at the RDP logs. We can look at what people are trying to do on NTLM and other legacy or encrypted protocols. But what does that look like for end user friction? If I take lunch and I come back and I want to go back to the same instances that I was working on before I went to lunch, I'm going to go to Salesforce in my box folder. I've been using them all morning. Should I have to re-authenticate in 6 different places? Do I have to re-authenticate every time from my same laptop but with a different browser? Maybe that answer can be no. And that's what CrowdStrike thinks, that from my standard job, from my regular IP on my regular system, doing what I do 100 times a day, I can be trusted doing the same activity. And this can all be written by policy. Our theory is that zero trust access doesn't have to kill your end user with 10 logins a day. This is a deeper picture for how we play with Okta in your environment. CrowdStrike Identity Threat Protection does continuous monitoring of all authentication requests that come in anywhere to the Okta server. These Okta's patterns and behavior analytics are used to enforce conditional access or step-up authentication using Okta. We can extend Okta MFA to legacy and proprietary resources with the exact same level of access enforcement. This kind of conditional access ensures a frictionless user experience by triggering Okta's MFA only when a risk accelerates past a threshold or triggers via policy for sensitive assets or anomalous behavior. As a side benefit, adding identity protection to CrowdStrike also increased the depth and breadth of coverage for the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Credential access is part of almost every TTP launch these days. Persistence is how the bad guys are setting up future Trojans and access into your networks. And infection is spread by lateral movement. We're proud of the extra protections of having endpoint and identity both covered, and this brings our customers a lot of added safety. It's also easy to add security without annoying employees, and that really sells it. The proof is in the pudding, though. We did a paper with three of our large enterprises with Frost and Sullivan to evaluate their return on investment into CrowdStrike Zero Trust from the cloud. Here's a quick summary. This first was a financial agency. Prior to using us, they had frequent password resets and a large volume of help desk calls, resetting and fixing them. They also had a lot of legacy systems. As is common with any organization over a decade old, it grew through mergers and acquisitions. We helped them extend their Okta to everything, their local, their ancient, their new devices in the cloud alike. It took them less than a day to set up identity protection, to integrate it with their existing MFA and SSO solutions, and they estimated that with reassigning duties around the team, we saved them a half FTE of hours over what they were previously administrating. That's the easy button. The next study was an energy and utilities company. Their challenge to us doing the POV was to prove that our solution was as good or better than their current UEBA solution. This meant that we had to answer the same use cases while saving time and money. Challenge accepted. For starters, our licensing model is cheaper than most UEBAs. The Falcon Identity Threat Protection requires no rack space, no specialized hardware, and no specialists needed to deploy and tune it. So they got cloud-based identity analytics and behavior controls for a fraction of the price. Plus, you don't have to be a security expert or an Active Directory architect to use our interface, and it really does teach you as you go along. The third case study is all about log savings and SIM tuning. There are a limited number of truly gifted SIM engineers in the world, and even the most gifted takes a certain amount of time to construct meaningful events of interest out of raw log materials, sorted and dumped and stored in the SIM infrastructure. Log storage is also the most expensive part. The more you feed into a SIM, especially from a domain controller, the more it costs per license. Using only CrowdStrike's specific identified incidents loading into their logs, loading into their SIM, this company was able to free up and reassign an analyst from SIM duty and tuning, and the whole thing was set up in an hour. And I hear their analyst is happily moving upward and onward into an architect position. In all of these cases, unanimously, they were also happy about the reduced security pain for their employees. Let's check back in with Grant at Safelite again for how he gets value out of the Okta part of our integration and what a difference frictionless zero trust access makes for his people. So tell us, how does your Okta CrowdStrike identity protection integration make it easy for you, especially as you extended Okta MFA to your legacy system, for example?
The CrowdStrike identity protection integration for Okta has made the experience for our engineers fantastic. So for one, it allows us to use a single MFA platform and allows us to have a more secure environment as it relates to our on-premise systems as well as our cloud technologies. So for our engineers now, they get to use MFA. We know that it's protecting them, and it's pretty seamless for them to do that without really slowing down any of their regular administration duties.
What value do you get from the CrowdStrike endpoint and identity and Okta combined together? How is this holistic view helping, and are you able to measure improved security?
From a security improvement standpoint, I think what we've really observed is that we have much better user experience now. By assigning a risk score with CrowdStrike Identity Protection to each of our users, we're able to create a more customized experience based on the actual risk exposure of an individual, especially with all of our associates working remotely right now and our field associates who travel around regularly. This has given a really nice experience to not be prompted by MFA when I'm logging in for my remote office every day. And we also know a better exposure when we have threats in remote networks, which is much more prevalent today as associates are working from home. And now that it's been going, how are your associates responding to frictionless zero trust? Have you gotten any feedback? Our associates love it. So we've actually been able to reduce the frequency of time that they are changing their passwords. And from that standpoint, everybody loves that they don't have to do it as often. And the best part is that our passwords are actually getting stronger. So we're seeing our associates' risk scores drop, even with a remote work experience that's been completely chaotic in some days, as everybody's experienced. So overall, the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive for them to have a much more frictionless and a frictionless user experience. I hope I've been able to show you today that good security can be good business as well.
Is Zero Trust a budgeted program item for you? Are you prepared to vet, assemble, deploy, tune, and maintain a diverse stack of pieces? Or are you looking for an affordable, frictionless solution due to a budget limited by COVID? Crowdstrike and our partners are here to make Zero Trust frictionless with better coverage at more affordable rates, all at the same time. Thank you for taking the time to linger with me today. I'll stay on for a few minutes to answer any questions. Again, it's on the left in the chat window. And I wanted to invite you all to drop by or book a meeting at Crowdstrike RSA booth next month if you want to see a demo or just chat about different options. And a big thank you to Okta for having me here today.